From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on-spot news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all day only on
Network. First, the headlines. Niger militant attack kills 23 soldiers. Israel, thousands of Christians celebrate Palm Sunday in Jerusalem. Thailand, government delivers aid to Myanmar. Ireland, country to get youngest ever premier. United States, snowstorm downs power lines across New England. Australia, AUKUS funding to create 1,000 new jobs in UK. And now to news and details. A militant attack on Nigerian forces in a border region near Mali and Burkina Faso killed 23 soldiers, the Defense Ministry said Friday. The soldiers were taking part in an overnight clearing operation on Tuesday in the country's west when they were ambushed by armed men on motorcycles equipped with homemade bombs, the ministry statement said, according to state television. Details of the attack were previously unreported. The statement by Defense Minister General Salifu Modi blamed the attack on jihadi fighters, saying the army had killed about 30 attackers in response. The violence highlighted the troubles facing Niger and its neighbors. Niger, along with neighbors Mali and Burkina Faso, is battling jihadi groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group in a decade-long conflict in the Sahel region that is worsening. The violence killed thousands of people last year, and civilian killings routinely go unpunished. More than 2 million people have been displaced, according to the United Nations. Correspondent on Friday reported on rare first-hand details of a mass killing at a village in Burkina Faso. Until recently, Niger was a critical element of U.S. military operations in the Sahel, where Washington has sought to help local governments beat back militant groups. Some 650 U.S. troops and hundreds of support staff work at a recently built airbase in Agadez, about 920 kilometers from Niamey. But last week, Niger's ruling junta says it no longer recognized the U.S. presence there, casting doubt on the future of U.S. military operations in the Sahel. The U.S. has said the ruling junta has not formally asked them to leave, and it is weighing its options. The junta in Niamey seized control in July when soldiers, including some trained by the U.S., ousted the country's democratically elected president. France completed the withdrawal of its forces from Niger in December after being asked to leave. Mali and Burkina Faso are also led by juntas and have experienced 2 coups each since 2020. Fed up with the continued violence, both juntas have expelled French forces and turned to Russian mercenaries instead. Senegalese anxiously waited the result of a presidential election Monday, following months of uncertainty and unrest that tested the country's reputation as a stable democracy in a region rife with coups. The vote Sunday was largely peaceful, with a high turnout, observers said. Results from polling stations that had completed counting were posted overnight on social media with official announcements, expected later this week. More than 7 million people were registered to vote in a country of roughly 17 million. To win in the first round, a candidate must gain more than 50% or it goes to a runoff. Analysts say a second round is likely between opposition candidate Bassirou Diomaye Faye and former Prime Minister Amadou Ba, the candidate for the governing party. Some opposition supporters Sunday night were adamant their candidate had already won. In the capital of Dakar, some people sat on car rooftops chanting while others carried flags, banners and set off fireworks saying Faye would win outright. This is Senegal's 4th democratic transfer of power since gaining independence from France more than 6 decades ago. It took place 1 month later than initially scheduled after President Macky Sall tried to delay it until the end of the year. Sall is constitutionally barred from seeking a third term and is expected to step down on April 2nd when his mandate ends. After the polls closed Sunday, voters praised the peaceful outcome amid concerns after months of deadly protests ignited last summer by the jailing of the popular opposition leader Ousmane Sonko and concerns that the president wanted to stay in power. Rights groups said dozens were killed while hundreds more were jailed. In a move that diffused tensions just ahead of the election, Sonko was released after months in prison, along with fire to jubilant celebrations on the streets of Dakar. Sonko was barred from the race in January due to a prior conviction, and Faye ran in his place. The southern African nation of Malawi has declared a state of disaster over drought in 23 of its 28 districts, and the president says it urgently needs more than $200 million in humanitarian assistance, less than a month after neighboring Zambia also appealed for help. Malawi is the latest country in the region to have its food supply crippled by a severe dry spell that has been linked to the El Nino weather phenomenon. A third country, Zimbabwe, has also seen much of its crops decimated and is considering following suit and declaring a drought disaster, underlining concerns raised by the UN World Food Programme late last year that numerous nations in the Southern Africa were on the brink of a hunger crisis because of the impact of El Nino. The WFP said there were already nearly 50 million people in southern and parts of Central Africa facing food insecurity even before one of the driest spells in the decades hit. USAID, the U.S. government AIDS agency, said that more than 20 million people in southern Africa would urgently need food aid in early 2024, partly due to the El Nino effect. Last month was the driest in February in 40 years of Zambia and Zimbabwe, according to the WFP's seasonal monitor, while Malawi, Mozambique, and parts of Angola had severe rainfall deficits. Millions in southern Africa rely on the food they grow to survive. Corn, the region's staple food, has been badly affected by the drought. El Nino is a natural recurring weather phenomenon, including the warming of the sea surface in parts of the Pacific Ocean. It has impacts on global weather, including causing below average rainfall in southern Africa. Some scientists say that climate change is making El Ninos stronger and their impacts more extreme. The 2015 to 2016 El Nino also brought a severe drought for southern Africa, the region's worst in 35 years, according to the UN Office for Humanitarian Affairs. Humans aren't the only ones affected, with conservative officials in Zimbabwe reporting the rare occurrence of at least 100 elephants dying in a national park late last year because of water holes drying up in the drought. Before the national disasters announcement by Malawi and Zambia, the WFP and USAID had already launched a program to feed 2.7 million people in rural Zimbabwe facing food shortages, nearly 20% of that country's population. Thousands of Christians faithful attended Palm Sunday celebrations at Jerusalem's Sacred Mount of Olives, marking the first day of Holy Week as conflict surges across the region. Pilgrims waved branches and fronds in the air, items that were placed before Jesus' feet as he was greeted by cheering crowds during his entrance into Jerusalem, according to the Bible. Earlier Sunday, Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre, revered as the site of Jesus' crucifixion, also held a service. The annual celebration came as the Israel-Hamas war rages on in Gaza. However, the conflict appeared to have had a little effect on the procession, which swelled into a smaller size as last year. Although there is war, in my impression, I don't feel any kind, said David Manini, a pilgrim from Italy. The celebration marks the beginning of the most somber week in the Christian calendar, which marks Jesus' crucifixion on Good Friday and his resurrection on Easter. I'm here because I love Jesus Christ, said Jennifer Whedon, who traveled from the United States for the occasion. Since the war erupted, Israel has seen a huge downturn in tourism. The war began on October 7th when Hamas militants from Gaza invaded southern Israel, killing 1,200 people and taking 250 others hostage. Israel has responded with an air and ground war that has left more than 32,000 Palestinians dead, according to the health ministry in the Hamas-ruled territory. One of the placards held by a pilgrim read, "Save us, Lord," the Church of Saints Porphyrius and Holy Family Church, Gaza. In late October, Palestinian health officials said that an Israeli strike hit St. Porphyrius, a Greek Orthodox church in Gaza where displaced Palestinians were sheltering, killing 18 people. An attack by al-Qaeda in southern Yemen killed at least 2 troops loyal to a secessionist group, officials said Monday, in the first attack since the extremist group's branch in the Arab country announced the death of its leader earlier this month. The attack, which took place late Sunday in the mountainous Wadi Omran area of Abiyan province, also wounded 4 troops from the Southern Armed Forces, which is loyal to the secessionist Southern Transitional Council, according to a statement from the Southern Forces. The Separatist Council is backed by the United Arab Emirates and controls much of Yemen's south. It is at odds with the internationally recognized government, although they are allies in the war against the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. The statement said the militants ambushed a security patrol in the area, triggering hours-long gun battles. The militants burned a military vehicle, according to Lieutenant Colonel Khalid Al-Wai. The ambush came as the southern forces have intensified their attacks in recent weeks on an al-Qaeda stronghold in Wadi Amran, the statement said. The Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula Group, or AQAP, claimed responsibility for the attack. The claim was posted on Al-Qaeda-linked channels on Telegram with images of the burned vehicle. AQAP is seen as one of the more dangerous branches of the extremist group that is still operating more than a decade after the killing of founder Osama bin Laden. It is active in several regions in Yemen, exploiting the country's years-long conflict to cement its presence in the impoverished nation. Yemen's ruinous civil war began in 2014 when the Houthis seized the capital of Sana'a and much of northern Yemen and forced the internationally recognized government into exile. A Saudi-led coalition, including the UAE, intervened the next year to try to restore the government to power. Sunday's attack came after AQAP announced the death of its leader, Khalid al-Batafi, earlier this month, without giving details. It named Saad bin Atef al-Awlaki as the new leader of the group. North Korea said Monday that Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida offered to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un as soon as possible, but stressed that prospects for their country's first summit in about 20 years would depend on Tokyo tolerating its weapons program and ignoring its past abductions of Japanese nationals. In a parliamentary session, Kishida said that a meeting with Kim is crucial to resolve the abduction issue, a major sticking point in bilateral ties, and that is his government has been using various channels to hold the summit. Kim's sister and senior official, Kim Yo-jong, said in a statement that Kishida recently used an unspecified channel to convey his position that he wants to meet Kim Jong-un in person as soon as possible. She said there will be no breakthrough in North Korea-Japan relations as long as Kishida's government is engrossed in the abduction issue and interfaces in the North's exercise of our sovereign rights, apparently referring to the North's weapons testing activities. The history of the DPRK-Japan relations gives a lesson that it's impossible to improve the bilateral relations full of distrust misunderstanding, only with an idea to set out on a summit meeting, Kim Yo-jong said, using the abbreviation of the North's official name, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. If Japan truly wants to improve the bilateral relations and contribute and ensure regional peace and stability as a close neighbor of the DPRK, it is necessary to make it a political decision for strategic option confirmed to its overall interests, she said. In February, Kim Yo-jong issued a similar statement on bilateral ties, saying North Korea was open to improving relationships with Japan and inviting Kishida to Pyongyang. She said, but she said this would be possible only if Tokyo stops talking issues with North Korea's legitimate rights of self-defense and the abduction issue. Thailand delivered its first batch of humanitarian aid to war-torn Myanmar on Monday in what officials hope will be Myanmar military control, providing it with a propaganda boost while leaving the vast majority of displaced people in contested areas without access to assistance. Myanmar is racked by nationwide armed conflict that began after the army ousted the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi in February 2021 and suppressed widespread non-violent protests that sought a return to democratic rule. The fighting has displaced millions of people and battered the economy. Thailand sent 10 trucks over the border from the northern province of Tak, carrying some 4,000 packages of aid to 3 towns in Kayin State, also known as Karen State, where it will be distributed to approximately 20,000 displaced people. The parcels contained aid worth around 5 million baht, mostly food, instant beverages, and other basic items such as toiletries. More than 2.8 million people in Myanmar are displaced according to UN agencies, most by fighting that arose after the army's takeover. They say 18.6 million people, including 6 million children, require humanitarian aid. Kao, Chief Operating Officer of the UN's World Food Programme, said earlier this month that 1 in 4 of the displaced is at risk of acute food insecurity. The initiative, for what has been called a humanitarian corridor, is being carried out by the Thai Red Cross, with funding from Thailand's Foreign Ministry and logistical support from the army, which traditionally has played a major role in border activities. Officials from Thailand and Myanmar's Kayin State attended a send-off, but officials say more doctors are urgently needed. South Korea has a rapidly aging population, and its doctors-to-population ratio is one of the lowest in the developed world. In a meeting with ruling party leader Han Dong-hoon on Sunday, representatives of medical professors and doctors at some 40 university hospitals where the junior doctors work while training expressed support for the striking doctors, saying the government recruitment plan would collapse our country's medical system. Kim Chang-soo, head of the emergency committee at those universities, said Monday. Kim called Yoon's overture a positive step, but said the current standoff between doctors and the government won't be resolved unless the government rolls back its recruitment plan. You are watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We return after this break.
From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring honest pop news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN. Across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring honest pop news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN.
This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. Now the rest of our stories. The bodies of 3 Rohingya refugees were found in the sea as the Indonesian authorities ended a search for survivors from a boat that capsized near Aceh province, the provincial search and rescue agency said Sunday. Fishers and a search and rescue team rescued 75 people from the boat on Thursday, 44 men, 22 women, and 9 children after they made a grueling sea. There had been conflicting reports in Russian media outlets that said 3 or all 4 men admitted culpability. The investigators charged Daledson Mizoyev, 32, Saida Krami, 30, Shamsuddin Fariduni, 25, and Muhammad Sober Fazov, 19, with committing a terrorist attack resulting in the death of others. The offense carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Moscow's Basmani District Court ordered that the men, all of whom were identified in the media as citizens of Tajikistan, be held in custody until May 22nd, pending investigation and trial. Russian media had reported that the men were tortured during interrogation by the security services, and Mizoyev, Rajabalizoda, and Faridini showed signs of heavy bruising, including swollen faces. Rajabalizoda also had a heavily bandaged ear. Russian media said Saturday that one of the suspects had his ear cut off during interrogation. The Associated Press couldn't verify the report or the videos purporting to show this. The fourth suspect, Fazov, was brought to court from a hospital in a wheelchair and sat with his eyes closed throughout the proceedings. He was attended by medics while in court, where he wore a hospital gown and trousers and was seen with multiple cuts. Court officials said Mizoyev and Balizoda admitted guilt for the attack after being charged. Poland during a major missile attack on Ukraine, prompting the NATO member to activate F-16 fighter jets. It was Russia's third big missile attack on Ukraine in the past 4 days and the second to target the capital Kyiv. The governor of the Lviv region, Maxim Kozy, said on the Telegram platform that critical infrastructure was hit, but he didn't specify what precisely was struck. No deaths or injuries were reported. Later, authorities said that rescuers had just put out a fire in a critical infrastructure facility in Lviv region, which had been attacked with missiles and drones at night and in the morning. The head of Kyiv's military administration, Serhiy Popko, said Russia used cruise missiles launched from Tu-95MS strategic bombers. An air alert in the capital lasted for more than 2 hours as rockets entered Kyiv in groups from the north. He said the attacks were launched from the air damage in the capital, he said. Armed forces support a region near the border with Ukraine and stayed in Polish airspace for 39 seconds, the statement said. It wasn't immediately clear if Russia intended for the missile to enter Poland's airspace. Cruise missiles are able to change their trajectory to evade air defense systems. Polish Defense Minister Ladisław Kosiniak-Kamysz later told reporters in a televised news conference that the Russian missile would have been shot down had there been any indication that it was heading towards a target in Poland. He said that Polish authorities monitored the attack on Ukraine and were in contact with Ukrainian counterparts. Polish and NATO F-16s were activated as part of the strategic response, secreting them from the Pope Mobile, making several loops around the piazza at the end of the service. Palm Sunday kicks off a busy week for Francis leading up to Easter Sunday, when the faithful commemorate the resurrection of Christ. On Thursday, Francis is due to travel to a Rome women's prison for the traditional washing of the feet ritual. On Friday, he is scheduled to preside over the torchlit way of the cross procession at Rome's Colosseum, reenacting Christ's crucifixion. The following day marks the Easter Vigil, during which Francis presides over a solemn nighttime service in the Basilica, followed by Easter Sunday Mass in St. Peter's Square and his noontime blessing from the loggia above. The Holy Week schedule is challenging for popes even under the best of circumstances, but that is especially true this year for Francis, who has been battling on and off all winter what he and the Vatican have described as a case of the flu, bronchitis, or a cold. For the last several weeks, he has the head of Fianna Fáil. He was the country's youngest ever leader, when first elected at age 38, as well as Ireland's first openly gay Prime Minister, Varadkar, whose mother is Irish and father is Indian, was also Ireland's first biracial to hold seat. Thousands of hardy souls across New England spent Sunday digging out after a major weekend storm dumped more than 2 feet of snow in some areas, caused multiple road accidents, downed power lines, and left hundreds of thousands across the Northeast in the dark, some perhaps for days. Heavy snowfall from the storm stretched across the region, including upstate and northern New York through Vermont, New Hampshire, and most of Maine. Many areas saw totals of 8 inches to 12 inches of snow, and some of the highest totals exceeded 30 inches in south-central Vermont, said Zach Taylor, a meteorologist for the National Weather Service. So overall, it was a pretty significant weather storm. For some areas, that was some of the most snow they've seen all winter with a single storm, Taylor said. The combination of sleet, freezing rain, and heavy wet snow took down trees and power lines. Espiritu Santo. Espiritu Santo's state government said Sunday that 15 people died and almost 5,000 were out of their homes due to heavy rains falling since Friday night. Rio authorities reported 8 deaths Saturday. 13 deaths in Espiritu Santo were registered in Mimoso do Sul, a countryside city 74 kilometers south of the state capital, Vitoria. Rescue teams in both states had to stop their work Friday night because of risk of new landslides, with efforts restarting Saturday afternoon. Mayors and governors of Brazil's southeast region had alerted residents of the potential problems for the weekend since Thursday, allegedly ordering the killing of a popular Rio de Janeiro councilwoman of Marielle Franco, a 38-year-old city councilwoman, in a drive-by shooting shook Brazil profoundly and reverberated around the world. She stood as one of the only black women on the council and was also bisexual. Her assertiveness and more presence ruffled some people, but she remained unbowed. Police investigators said federal legislator Chiquinho Brazao and his brother Domingos Brazao, a member of the Rio State's accounts watchdog, were detained on suspicion of ordering the killing of Franco. Both are allegedly connected to criminal groups known as militias, which illegally charges residents for various services, including protection. Iberatin Gudis, the lawyer representing Domingos Brazao, denied the accusations against his client. He did not know Marielle, had no connection with Marielle, he told reporters. Lawyers for Chiquinho Brazao, who served on Rio's council at the same time as Franco and is now a congressman, and former police chief Rivaldo Barbosa, said their clients denied any wrongdoing, according to local media. Federal Justice Minister Ricardo Lewandowski said at a news conference that the motivation for the crime was complex because that group has multiple interests. He said investigations suggested lawmaker Chiquinho Brazao was especially upset about a bill that his then-colleague Franco sponsored at the City Council about regulation of land to build public housing in Rio. At this moment, it is very clear who are the perpetrators of this hateful, heinous crime of political nature, said the minister, who added that 4 other people had documents seized. Among them, he said, is a police detective who also investigated the case, Guinea-Tin Lages. Lewandowski also said the men jailed earlier will be transferred from Rio to the capital, Brasilia. Australia's ACCUS funding will help create more than 1,000 new jobs in Derby in the United Kingdom, according to the beneficiary Rolls-Royce. The project, which is jointly funded by the UK's Ministry of Defence, is also expected to see the construction of new office space in addition to manufacturing facilities. The Australian government revealed late last week that it would spend $4.6 billion Australian dollars to the UK over the next 10 years to ensure the Rolls-Royce nuclear reactor production line in Derby was able to supply reactors for use in Adelaide-built submarines. The government has not provided detailed information about what the funding will cover, except to say it will enable the Rolls-Royce factory in Derby to operate at an increased rate of production. Rolls-Royce, however, has been more forthcoming. It has welcomed the Australian government funding and said work was already underway to double the size of the Rolls-Royce submarine site in Rainsway, Derby. Now jointly funded by UK MOD and the Australian Department of Defence, the expansion work announced last summer will create over 1,000 new jobs in Derby across a range of disciplines, including manufacturing and engineering. The company said in a statement published on its website. It will also see new manufacturing and office facilities being built on recently acquired land surrounding the existing Rainsway site. The year-by-year breakdown of the Australian funding over the next 10 years has not yet been disclosed, but the Australian government sees the investment as crucial to ensuring nuclear reactors are able to be built on time for both Australian and UK needs. It insists that despite the plan to spend billions of dollars on boosting the industrial base in both the UK and the US, a much bigger sum will be spent on infrastructure and skills development in Australia. On Friday, the coalition's defence spokesperson, Andrew Hastie, said he was pleased to see the government take these next steps in concert with the UK and the US, but Hastie called on the government to be honest with the Australian people and provide further details around concept. Labour must be upfront and clarify if the funding announced today has come from further reprioritisation within defence and therefore at the cost of existing capabilities. That was based on a Senate estimates exchange in October when an official said that the government had a provision of $3 billion that provision might be. A magnitude 6.9 earthquake has hit a remote part of western Papua New Guinea, killing at least 3 people and causing extensive damage to around 1,000 homes, officials said. The quake rocked the East Sepik region at about 6:20 a.m. Sunday near the town of Ambuti, about 470 miles northwest of the capital of Port Moresby and at a depth of 25 miles, according to reports by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. East Sepik Province Governor Alan Bird